Great. Good afternoon, all. I hope this finds you and your loved ones safe and healthy during these interesting and very challenging times. My name is Patty Simonton. I'm the director of the Be Green Business Program here at Bethesda Green. Thanks for taking the time today to join us for the second session of our 5-part summer speaking series, Tackling Environmental Challenges Through Sustainable Entrepreneurship. I'll begin by sharing a quick overview of our work. Through our Be Green Business Program, we work to cultivate innovative eco-entrepreneurs and nurture the development of green businesses to ensure compatibility between economic development and environmental protection. To this end, as part of our B Corp program, we advise existing local businesses through B Corp certification and help them discover and implement best practices for sound governance, support for workers, and sustainability. Through our Innovation Lab, we are constantly on the lookout for leaders who are building for-profit business models around innovative and sustainable solutions to tackle environmental and social challenges. Since Bethesda Green relaunched its entrepreneurial programming in January 2018, we have supported 18 companies ranging from idea stage to those raising seed and Series A investment rounds. At this time, we are actively recruiting for our Spring 2021 Accelerator cohort, as well as our Amplifier program. Entrepreneurs who are interested in joining the Bethesda Green community are invited to contact me directly to learn more. I'll add my email to the chat. Today, I am pleased to welcome 2 amazing individuals who will speak from their personal experiences about the lessons they've learned as founders over the years. We'll explore important questions such as, at what stage in product development an entrepreneur should prioritize sustainability and at what cost? And we'll discuss how founders can build sustainability into their brands from the beginning. Seth Goldman is the founder of Eat the Change, a platform to inform and empower consumers to make dietary choices aligned with their concerns around climate and health. The first business launched under the Eat the Change umbrella is Plant Burger, a plant-based quick-serve restaurant that offers delicious burgers, sandwiches, fries, and soft serve. I can attest to that. It's quite yummy. Seth and his wife, Julie Farkas, have also launched ETC Impact, which is a grants program to donate $1 million over the next 3 years into nonprofit organizations that educate and inspire consumers to make climate-conscious choices with their diet. Their first grant deadline received over 120 applications. Seth is also the co-founder of Honest Tea and chair of the board of Beyond Meat. He has been widely recognized for his entrepreneurial success and impact, including Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year in Greater Washington, the Washington, D.C. Business Hall of Fame, Beverage Industry Magazine's Executive of the Year, Beverage World's #1 Disruptor, and Partnership for Healthier America's CEO of the Year. He's a graduate of Harvard College and Yale School of Management and is a Henry Crown Fellow of the Aspen Institute. Seth and Barry Nailbuff are the authors, along with graphic artist So-Young Choi, of the New York Times best-selling comic book, Mission in a Bottle. Bart Yablonsky is the owner of Dawson's Market, located in Rockville, Maryland, and has built his career with a focus on food and a passion for the environment, community, and a healthy lifestyle. Raised in Baltimore, Bart began his love of great food as a teen by taking trips to DC with his father to sample the latest and greatest new restaurants. As a small business owner, his interests expanded to wellness and green business design, owning all natural day spas in Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. Bart joined the opening team of Dawson's Market in 2012 as the general manager. In late 2018, after Dawson's Market closed under previous ownership, Bart stepped in to bring it back to life. He's married to Paige, who he met through one of his natural food customers, and they have a wonderful son and enjoy traveling and finding the best new places to eat. Thank you both for taking the time to join us here this afternoon. So excited to have you here.
Thank you.
Great to be with you.
We'll keep the discussion going until about 4 p.m., at which point we'll open it up to questions from the audience. I invite attendees to submit their questions here in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. I'd like to kick off with just a quick, a 3-question poll. I'd like to just get a sense of who's here in the audience with us. And I believe, Marisa, you're gonna launch that? Are you able to see the poll on your end, everyone? There it is. Wonderful. Give you just a few minutes to answer some 3 questions there. We're super interested in kind of just how you define sustainability. Does it, is it part of your thought process when you buy things? The broader broader topic here. Now, I just want to confirm, is everyone able to see the results in real time? Or is that just me?
I think it's just you.
It's just me again. Oh, these polls are so confusing. All right, it looks like we are about evenly split between entrepreneurs, students, and consumers. It looks as though almost all of you, because the multiple choice for when you think about sustainability in your purchasing decisions, it looks like you all consider almost all of them, with labor is a slight lower amount there, as well as organic certification. So right now, product materials and ingredients, as well as packaging, seem to be your top priorities. And in the past 6 months, 88% of you have chosen not to buy a product because it was not sustainable. So awesome, it's great, excellent. I'm gonna go ahead and end this poll and we'll get started. Oh, look, the results. I can share the results. Oh, that's so much easier. I should really do these more often. So those are the results, so you can all see all of this too. Great, okay. All right, well, let's kick off. Time to hear from our guests. Seth, I'm gonna throw the first question to you. Take us back to the early days of Honest Tea, when you were making decisions about whether to source organic ingredients or to use glass versus plastic bottles. What factored into your decision?
Well, thanks, Patty, for organizing this. And first, I just have to say, as a co-founder of Bethesda Green, I'm always glad to see this community of entrepreneurs get together and be able to offer these kind of resources and tools and just a sense of community, because as an entrepreneur, that is often the hardest part. Just you're out there on your own. And so being able to ask these kind of questions and share ideas with others is always a positive step and something that I certainly encourage others to do. I think, you know, for me, and I'll admit that I'm biased, but, you know, I consider myself much more of an activist than an entrepreneur. So, you know, any company that I get involved with starts with, is there a way to make this, really, even before I launch the company, is what's the way to make an impact? What's an issue I care about? And how do I organize people and resources to attack that issue? And, you know, as it's been the case with Honest Tea and Beyond Meat and Plant Burger and now with Eat the Change, the answer for me has been it's by creating companies that can go address those issues. For those reasons, it all starts with thinking about impact first. And then I sort of go backwards. Okay, if that's the impact I want to have, how then do I create a brand and a business and a proposition that's relevant for a consumer? So I start with the cause, and then I go right to the consumer, because if I'm not making a connection with the consumer, then it's not going to succeed. So with Honest Tea, you know, we said, how do we address the issue of so many calories in the American diet, and how do we address the issue of really a system of agriculture that's reliant on, you know, chemical and pesticide intensive and artificial ingredient intensive. And so for us, obviously lower calorie was the way we made the ingredients, and then organic was the form for the growing, and then obviously packaging, what's going to resonate best for the consumer, and certainly launching in the natural channel, glass made the most sense. But also, as we grew, we recognized that fair trade certification was going to make sense. It was a way to connect more deeply with the consumer and to be authentic about the supply chain. So I think, you know, for me, those two causes, those two questions, first the cause and the impact, and then the consumer, really drive the decisions.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I remember kind of chatting with you, you know, during one of the Honest Tea tours with Net Impact about kind of the discussion around plastic versus glass and really the supply chain. And, you know, glass can break and plastic is lighter, and there's, you know, and if it's lighter, then it uses less fossil fuels to transport. So there's definitely pros and cons to all of that. Yeah,
and we also recognize there are merits to plastic as a bottle, because in certain channels, like you say, it's lighter to ship. It certainly makes it more convenient. And for the consumer, it was accessible and it was recyclable. And there were, you know, whether it's convenience stores or food service channels or obviously recreation channels, there's places where glass doesn't work well. And the other piece is glass was much more expensive as a package. And so, you know, if we have a commitment to democratizing organics and democratizing healthy food, if we insist on glass, then we're going to limit the audience we connect with. And that goes right against the impact we're trying to have. So I would say it's certainly, there's no answer that's going to be 100% correct all the time, but we've got to, keep the balance, that impact and relevance to the consumer all the time.
Great, thank you. Bart, you speak with a lot of early stage entrepreneurs who are interested in selling to Dawson's market, where consumers highly value sustainability and expect products to meet a high standard of quality. What advice do you give to those entrepreneurs?
Oh, thank you as well for putting this all together. This is great to be able to talk with you guys. We do see a lot of people come in at all stages. We certainly have seen a number of people who come in who just have a beginning idea. So they really don't even have a product yet. They just have a great recipe or they have a great story, and they want to figure out how to make a business out of that and how to feed people. So and then we have people who've come in, through your program, or people who are producing something at a farmer's market maybe, and they want to go in that next step into the retail. And so we get, kind of all different levels of interest from people and in all different stages of the production. So for us, we are very focused on local. So I think that's one of the reasons that people, gravitate towards Dawson's, is because it's part of our commitment to support local businesses within 100 miles of our store. And then we also, because we're an independent, unique store, we're able to be very flexible. I worked for Whole Foods before, great company, but it's a lot harder to get a product in there when you're talking about trying to go into an entire region or entire country versus one store. So I think we're a good opportunity as kind of a testing point for a business to come in and kind of put their toe in the water and see exactly what's it like to sell to retail. So we sit down and we talk with them about their product. Connection to consumer, like Seth just said, is super important. It's got to be a good product, first of all. It's got to taste good, and it needs to fill a niche, or it needs to have some really compelling piece to it. Either it's the story, or it's the recipe, or it's the ingredients that set it apart from other products. So once we kind of figure out, hey, this fits into a category that customers are going to be interested in, then we start talking about, the process of making the product and the ingredients. So for us, we have a pretty long list of standards that we follow for ingredients. And so we help these entrepreneurs with that, making recommendations. Certainly everything you can do to make a product stand out, you should do. So if it's the ingredients, if it's the packaging, the price, all those things. So there's a lot of competition in food, as I'm sure Seth can attest to. So, there's so much competition, and it also comes down to where they're going into the store. If I were to create a product, I would make a shelf stable product because there's lots of shelf space in a store. I'd stay away from frozen products because there's not a lot of frozen space in stores. So you have to kind of think about where your product's going to fit into the mix, and who else is already on the shelf. And so we go through that. We can help out with ingredient sourcing. That's another thing that we are able to do. We're a small store, but we have good buying capacity. And so we can help source ingredients. We have a lot of people who buy ingredients from us, make product, and turn around and sell it in our store. And we're happy to help them get those prices down versus trying to go, buy it somewhere on their own, which is going to ultimately make their retail higher. And on the packaging side, also super important, but also, there's a lot of decisions to be made in packaging because unfortunately, the more green the product is, the packaging is, there's a big price disparity there. And so I think the price disparity is still pretty significant on the packaging side. It's definitely come down on the ingredient side. Because more and more people are buying organic, and so we're buying natural, so the prices come down, but we're not there yet in packaging. I hope we get there.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, stores like Bart's are so valuable to entrepreneurs because every entrepreneur launching a brand wants to try. You got to try it out somewhere, and they'll say, "Oh, how do I get into Whole Foods?" Well, Whole Foods is so big. That may be, be careful what you wish for because you can't control, you may not be able to make it work. But to have a partner like a Dawson's that'll give you a try, that's invaluable. So think of it as an incubator, think of them as an incubation partner. And so to be able to get into a store like that and to really do everything you can to prove your concept, that's just extremely valuable for an entrepreneur. And frankly, these days, no one should go to Whole Foods first. You should be going to a Dawson's first. And if you have a partner like Bart that's willing to give you advice and feedback, That's just a really critical tool for any entrepreneur trying to enter the food business.
Right. I think, you're absolutely right. And a lot of times, you're really passionate about a product you're making, but you don't really know until you put it in front of the customer
That's it.
how it's going to be perceived and how they're going to take it. You also don't necessarily know about the shelf life and the packaging. Is it going to hold up in the freezer? Is it going to hold up on the shelf? So it's really an opportunity, and we're flexible. We understand we've had lots of products that have come in and they don't last on, there's an issue with the packaging. And so we discuss it, we figure it out, we change the packaging, and then the product sells. So we're
Yeah.
happy to be a part of that process.
That's exactly right. And it's so critical to hear the consumer. And even, obviously today with COVID, it's harder to have those conversations with consumers because you can't do sampling the way you used to, but you can still have interactions. And I'll just give you one example of where I learned such a valuable lesson. So when we started Honest Tea, we didn't have that phrase, just a tad sweet. Initially, we had this phrase, freshly brewed and barely sweetened. And so, I was there, I was giving out samples, and I had a customer come up to me, she said, oh, freshly brewed and barley sweetened, that sounds really good, interesting. I've never had that before. And I realized, like, barley sweetened, that's not what we're selling. But you only, until you hear the consumer's reaction, you wouldn't have thought of that. And I recognize, obviously, we need to pick a different phrase. So you literally have to hear the voice of the consumer, how they respond to your product. And so you want to get that feedback in a small setting, because if we had launched nationally with barley sweetened tea, we may not have succeeded.
Interesting. Barley sweetened. I love it. Seth, increasingly, companies may choose to publish information and metrics about their efforts to incorporate sustainability into their processes. What information should a corporation share about its product materials or ingredients, its supply chain, or its labor practices? And how might the information that they do share change as a corporation grows or even become publicly traded?
Well, I think they should try to be as transparent as they can and share everything, that transparency is critical to gaining consumers' trust. And obviously, what is a brand? A brand, it has to be a promise. It has to be something that consumers trust. So my only guidance would be, though, is that be careful to make sure your claims meet a standard definition. So don't go out there and say, oh, it's all natural, it's healthy, it's sustainable. Those are words that can be interpreted so many different ways. And so, what we did at Honest Tea is we gained the certification, the organic certification. So rather than claiming environmentally friendly, we had a third party, a federally enforced third party verify that we were growing without any chemical pesticides, without any chemical fertilizers, no artificial ingredients. And then we didn't try to say we were socially responsible. We worked with Fair Trade, Fair Trade USA, to make sure there was a paper trail from the tea gardens through the supply chain to make sure that the workers were paid a living wage, that a portion of the sales goes back to them. And we could talk about it, but you have to be very careful. If you only selectively disclose facts, you are putting yourself in a position where someone could selectively find other facts that undermine your claims. And so I'm a big believer in third-party verification, even at these early stages. And you want to disclose that. With a company like Beyond Meat, early on, we did a life cycle analysis, but we commissioned it as a third-party peer-reviewed life cycle analysis. So we worked with the University of Michigan to do a study, and they found that the Beyond Burger uses 99% less water, 93% less land compared to a beef burger. But like I say, it was peer reviewed, so it wasn't just us paying a consultant to tell us what we wanted to hear. And so I think I'm in favor of all that transparency, but I just caution not to be selective about how it's disclosed and what you disclose.
When thinking about kind of the limited resources that entrepreneurs have in trying to figure out what to even measure, where do you encourage them to start or to put their focus with these early metrics?
Yeah, so obviously organic is a great place. It depends on the category and what they're doing, but if you're in food, organic is great because we don't have to do the research on we don't have to go visit a farm. Let's say we're using organic flour in a recipe. If they have the certification and we know the certifier, we can verify that that's accurate. So in a way, it's delegating some of that due diligence. And so small companies can't do that, but if you're using that organic flour, you're allowed to put that on your label as an ingredient. And then, the certification really isn't that expensive. I mean, obviously for a one store brand, it takes some time that you won't have it that, but even launching in, a handful of stores, it's I think worth getting those kinds of certifications, or at least having a trail, a target. So, this new brand we're launching, Eat the Change, we've been looking at kosher certification, and we realized we're not going to have it in our first line of products, just because it's too complex. We're too small as a brand starting up to be able to get, basically the plant is only going to make the product on the weekends, and then the rabbis have a whole issue about certification on the weekends because they can't be in the plant. Right? We're not going to get it in our first run. So have a line of sight. So how you'll get there. We know we'll get to that kosher certification eventually, but just not in the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, kosher certification is a whole other world too.
Yeah,
Access to, what touches the materials, everything. Yeah,
right.
Definitely a challenge. Bart, back to you. The premiums on organic ingredients, speaking of organic, or compostable packaging can make it difficult for some small manufacturers to use them and still remain competitive. What are some of the ways that you've seen companies successfully build their brands in a way that allows them to charge a premium in order to include those ingredients or the other high quality packaging that they want?
So I'll comment on the kosher thing first. I ran a kosher bakery for Whole Foods in Atlanta, and it is a challenge. So it's important, but it's a challenge. I will say that. So as far as the packaging goes and the ingredients, I think it kind of comes back to what I said earlier. Making the connection to the consumer and having a product that stands out is what's really important, because there's so many products out there. There are so many granolas, and there are so many frozen entrees, and to stand out, you need to have something that's unique about the product, the story about the product. The biggest thing that I think people need to understand, and when they're coming out to create a new product, and especially with COVID, is you really can't taste the product until you take it home. So the product has to sell from the package, what it looks like, the story behind it, and any other social media or website or whatever you've got, because, we do this great event at Dawson's called Meet the Locals. And it's the second Tuesday of every month where we have 10 to 15 local vendors come in, set up around the store and sample. Well, we're not doing that right now. And
it's
so
it's a shame to lose that, because
it is.
I mean, I'm not blaming you. I totally.
No. And and we've tried, we're testing out having the samples already put in containers, and the packaging issue then, but it's still, people are hesitant, which I understand, so we'll get back to it. But so right now, and even at the farmers markets is the same scenario. A lot of times farmers markets, they're always sampling, and, I understand that that's not happening as much also at the farmers market. So really the product needs to kind of stand out on its own, from the package, from the way it looks, and the story behind it. But ingredients are really important. So, if you look at two products on the shelf and one has organic ingredients and one doesn't, and the prices are pretty consistently in the same area, I would choose the organic. And I think most customers will. Our customers will pay a premium for something. I said earlier, we're all about local. I think local in some respects is a little bit easier to understand than organic. There's been, and I'm a big supporter of organic, but there's been a lot of, question about organic, and is China organic the same as, organic from the United States? And whereas local is very simple. There's a picture behind me here. I mean, local, it's 100 miles, it's local. There's no certification. We check obviously that they are within 100 miles, but other than that, I think most people understand local, and they're willing to pay a premium for local. And I think they're willing to pay a premium for local because they know that they're supporting somebody that's in their local community. And they understand that it is more expensive to make a product when you're a small independent business. I think that people understand that even a little bit more so than the organic side. And so I think it's a little bit easier to sell. I'll pay a little bit more for this because you know what? This guy lives down the street from me, and and I want to support somebody that's in my community, so I'll pay a premium on this product. The packaging is also really important. Its look is very important, as well as sustainability. So I think people will gravitate towards, and I think you said in your opening remarks, people will gravitate towards a sustainable packaged product over a non-sustainable package if there's not a huge disparity in price. And I think that premium, 10%, 15%, something like that, more expensive for package that's sustainable, people will easily spend that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that and just kind of following that line of thought, do you think that the challenge of how to dispose of or what to do with it, like if something's commercially compostable, but they're like, what do I do with that? Like, do they know that it can be recycled? Do they think it can be recycled? Like how do you think consumers respond to that?
Right. So I think, well, composting is a big challenge, I think. I mean, composting is super important, but I think it's very misunderstood. And I mean, even in the government side of things, some jurisdictions allow it, some don't. I mean, even in Montgomery County, it's much easier to compost if you're an individual person, but you're a store that's generating a huge amount of compost. We can't do it without a lot of challenges. So, that's a whole nother thing. I think recycling is pretty understood now. I mean, I think most people understand what recycling is. I think people know that you can put glass and paper and cardboard and things like that in the recycling bin and it gets processed. So I think the composting is something that hopefully is going to become much more adopted, but certainly recyclable containers, people understand those in my experience. So.
Yeah. Seth, did you have any follow-up on that topic at all?
Yeah, that's an interesting area too, where there's not consistent standards. And so someone says, well, commercially compostable. Well, most consumers don't have access to commercial composting facilities. And we saw there was a period where people were launching all these bottles that were commercially compostable, and they were putting them in recycling bins, and that contaminates the waste stream too. So there's no until we have federal policies for recycling, it's going to be just really ragtag and inconsistent and challenging. And we see it even in Bethesda with Bethesda Green. We put in recycling bins and we get all kinds of stuff put in there. So I think to the extent you can have clear directions on what is recyclable and how to recycle it, and that's something, there is actually a label called How to Recycle, where a consumer can go and get directions on what to do with this package and based on where they are. So once again, I think giving the consumer the tools is important, but it's still frustrating. And what's interesting these days as we look at so much stuff going online, and there are all these meal kits, but boy, they have so much packaging in them. Like for me, that's a turn up. We tried Blue Apron once, and I'm like, I felt terrible with all that packaging. Like, we're not doing that again. So there's no perfect solution there.
Yeah, and even that's such a trade-off in some ways, right? Because you have the packaging, but then they argue, like my understanding of Blue Apron is that the amount of food waste is substantially lower, right? So there's pros and cons and different, whatever is a priority to you, as a consumer to do.
Right.
Yeah, the whole thing is just fascinating to me. Seth, through your work at Eat the Change, you're looking to raise awareness about the importance of a climate-friendly diet. How do you define that? I mean, beyond ingredients, you include packaging and other supply chain considerations, but what advice do you have for entrepreneurs?
So we did put out on our website at eatthechange.org, we laid out exactly what we mean. And for Eat the Change, so I'll first talk about the nonprofit and then I'll talk about the for-profit. For the nonprofit, it is plant-based diets. We think that is absolutely the most single sustainable step people can take to have a more planet-friendly diet is moving away from animal-based protein. So that's a core pillar. But another one is organic. We think that's a clear step. Moving away from a chemical, pesticide-intensive approach is much better for our ecosystem. Thinking about how to address food waste. Food waste is has a huge footprint for our overall food system. And so how do we reduce that? And then thinking about packaging as well. So that's important. As we gear up to launch Eat the Change, the brand, which will be a consumer package brand, we've also identified plant-based. We've also identified organic. We've also looked at packaging that is efficient, and we're also looking at minimizing food waste. And then one other interesting step we're taking is we're looking at biodiversity and how do we support that. And it turns out that there were 6 crops that are responsible for over 57% of all agricultural output in the world. And even though there are 500,000 species of plants and fungi available. And so I'm like, wait, there's more than 500,000 species of crops, and our food system, more than half of it is based on only 6 crops. Well, that's just not good for biodiversity and for the planet. So we are choosing to base our ingredients for Eat the Change on after starting on number 7 and going down. And we have plenty of choices, obviously. But what's interesting is how quickly you start to run into challenges when you say, well, what can you include and what do you rely on in our food system is very, very heavily dependent on those first 6 crops. So that's kind of an interesting exploration we're going through right now.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And all of the different seeds and everything that's coming around, like, why not have that diversity? And Bart, I mean, you can help with all of that, right? And helping connect to those.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And of course it helps, with the small scale, right? So obviously there are benefits to producing at scale and to remaining small and nimble through that process. Bart, can you speak a little more about how your suppliers at Dawson's were able to respond to the market disruptions in the early days of the COVID crisis, and whether or not they were able to do so while maintaining the same priority on sustainability as they did before?
Sure. So, I think we survived very well through COVID, and being a small independent store, we had the silver lining in that we saw a lot of new customers because we were able to stay stocked, throughout the whole process. Very rarely were we out of things. The big sellers were toilet paper, yeast, and flour. So we had them in toilet paper. We never ran out. Yeast and flour, we had.
That's impressive.
Seriously.
I can't tell you the brand was not always the same, but we always had toilet paper. But the flour and the yeast we had pretty much all the time, but maybe a day or so here and there that we didn't have it and we had to wait for it to come in. But for us, we were able to stay in stock because we were our smaller company. We have the relationships with a lot of different vendors. Comparing us to the national conventional stores, most of them are getting their product from their own warehouse, first of all. Their volumes obviously are significantly higher dealing with hundreds of stores versus one. So that's all the things that kind of lined up to make us better prepared to stay in stock. But also because we have unique relationships with the vendors. So, one of our, and don't listen to this part about the meat, but, one of our meat vendors, is a restaurant vendor. And so they were really hit hard because the restaurants were all closed. So for us, that created an opportunity for us to have even more meat than we would normally do, and things that were unique and different that we didn't always have. So we were able to give things to customers that, that they hadn't seen before. And then, we kind of thought outside the box too. So because of the relationships, I bought a pallet of flour from our gourmet cheese provider. Who would ever thought, but it was quality product and they found it somewhere because they thought there was a need for it. And they called me because they knew that I would take it. And, we were able to keep that flour on the shelf and, that lasted us for a couple days. So, I think being nimble like that. And then I really have to say my staff, was on top of things. We really were thinking, where can we get this and asking questions all the time. Probably the best example, of people stepping up to the plate is on sanitizer. So, there's so many distilleries in our area, immediate area, and just around the country. And those guys were smart. They were making alcohol to drink, and they quickly positioned themselves and pivoted and started making alcohol for sanitizer. And so I know one of our primary distributors, I was dealing with like 60 of these guys. So there is, no shortage supply of sanitizer available now because so many people jumped up and said, we can do this, we have the capability to do it. It's a slight change and we'll do that. So that was probably one of the, the best advantages that we had. For the consumer side of things, I think on the vendor side, there was a lot of hard decisions that had to be made by vendors. And so for the consumer, you'll see that you may not have your favorite flavor of cereal for a while. And that's because it wasn't the favorite of everybody else. And so they shifted. So brands that were doing, 6 SKUs or 8 SKUs of cereal are now doing 4. Because they basically said, let's just make 4, let's focus on 4. We don't have to go through the process of changing equipment and changing ingredients. Let's just make twice as much of 4 as what we could have made of 8 before. So you're starting to see that. And we try to communicate that to our customers as well. We have signs on the shelf that tells them things that are what are considered long-term out of stock, which means that they're not going to be back for a while. So we try to communicate that, and our vendors communicate it to us so we could communicate it to the customers. You know, Seth was talking about transparency. We try to be as honest and upfront with people as possible to let them know kind of what to expect. And hey, buy this because it's going to be gone, or you don't need to buy that today. There's plenty of it available.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about the ripple effects of those decisions too, like even just reducing 1 or 2 SKUs from the selection option, and just how that would change everything on the,
Right, all the way down
on the upstream of that too, because, storage, ingredients.
And the hard part's going to be when it comes back. The hardest thing for a vendor is when the tag comes off the shelf. It's pretty much the product is gone, and so they're going to have to work very hard to get that product. Not because we don't want it back, but because we don't remember, and we forgot the SKU number or whatever, and so it's going to be hard. 6 months from now, or whenever this thing starts to kind of even out, for those other 4 SKUs to get back on the shelf. It's going to be a process, and it's going to be hard for the vendors to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of a big decision on their end to make, to kind of weigh both the short term and the long term potential risks there.
Do they ever go back to those 4?
Right.
4, right?
Right. Yeah. I have a magic wand question for both of you. Answer, really wherever your mind takes you. If you could wave a magic wand today to make a lasting impact on the future of consumer packaged goods moving forward, what would you do?
Well, I would go after this federal packaging approach. You think about it. I don't know how many municipalities there are in the U.S., but it's got to be thousands or even hundreds of thousands. And so as a result, you just get no consistency around packaging and no consistent disposal. And look, Germany is a different country, but when we launched Honest Tea in Germany, we were able to have a refillable glass bottle across the country. And that was because there was one system for capturing and recycling those bottles. And a refillable glass bottle is as close as you'll get to a closed loop for a reusable package. So that was only possible because there was a national policy. And what you have here is just breaking down it's chaos that's breaking down. So, a place like Alaska doesn't recycle glass bottles. So is it even ethical for us to sell a glass bottle, shipping glass all the way to Alaska? We know it's going into landfill. And then there's municipalities here, some of which aren't recycling plastic now. So where do you go? It just makes it that much harder. And so that would be one thing I would try to make happen.
Do you see policy moving in that direction?
No.
No.
The trade associations are pushing for it, but we're not in a climate right now where people are looking to the government to go solve. There's obviously some bigger challenges for the government right now, and I understand that, but if we really want to address packaging, that's the approach we need to take.
Yeah, well, the entrepreneurs in the audience here are hopefully taking that to heart and working toward that. Bart, what about you? If you could wave a magic wand today, what would you do?
I would make artificial ingredients and chemicals more expensive than natural alternatives, so that there's no reason to use them. So that's what I would do. I think we need to get to cleaner, healthier food, and the challenge is that the chemicals and the artificial ingredients and the bleach flours are all cheaper, and so it makes the food cheaper. And our food cost is already very low, I think, compared to what it is elsewhere. And if we could reverse that, that would be great, and people would eat healthier, and there'd be no need for all the other things that come with the use of artificial ingredients and chemicals. The other thing I would say to tie on to what Seth mentioned is I think just making composting more understandable and more available, which is, a huge project. But that would be a great step towards, climate change and just, getting people more, being able to do more for the environment and for the planet.
Awesome. Thank you. We have plenty of time for questions here. I invite attendees to please share your questions in the chat. We do have a couple that came in. One takes us back to the question around kosher certification. Stephen was just asking, what about doing a halal certification instead, since it's similar? Do either of you want to speak to that?
I think a halal certification is valuable, but I don't think it's a substitute, meaning I don't think someone who's looking for kosher isn't going to accept halal. And sometimes someone who wants halal will accept kosher, but if you really, I guess so if you're in the early stages, we went with kosher just because I thought it was a little more universally understood, but I think in the long term, it's probably valuable to get both. When you think about it as your overall cost of goods, it's not that expensive. And it's not like you need extra processes. That's really about, with both kosher and halal, are you using ingredients that are meet a certain standard and that are segregated and treated differently than the non-halal products. So it's not like you create a whole new additional cost if you also get halal in addition to kosher or vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. A question from Radhika from, I believe she's the founder of Homemade Peanut Butter. Great to have you on the call. She asks, I make peanut butter using locally sourced Virginia peanuts. There's not a huge supply of organic peanuts in Virginia, so how do I convert the sustainability of my product? I'm sorry, how do I convey the sustainability of my product when it cannot be certified organic?
I would say if there are certifications other than organic, so depending on where she's getting the product from. So if the product is naturally raised, for example, that would be something you could certainly convey. It's not the same level as organic standards, but a lot of smaller farmers, it's easier for them to achieve that type of certification than organic certification. And we certainly in our produce department, for example, have that as a type of certification that we advertise to customers. So I would say that, and then also just looking at the packaging side. So maybe there's opportunities on the packaging side to show that you're sustainable, and then also just having a mission as part of your business is also really important. What are they doing with the profits? So the profits going to support something in your community. That's another good way to show that you're trying to be a good steward of the planet and sustainable business.
Mm-hmm. Which kind of goes back to the reporting and that we talked about earlier, is like, what do you share to your stakeholders, and how do you communicate that effectively so people understand kind of the broader work that you may be doing as a company. A question from Pierre: what are the panel's thoughts on the future of bulk purchasing at markets? Is this something that is projected to expand to more mainstream shops?
I can speak to it just because I had a visit, from the health department, which is visiting everybody in Montgomery County right now, just with the new standards and things. And, bulk, it appears, unfortunately, the bulk is going away for a while, specifically for COVID. It's got to do with contact. And so, areas that are considered high contact areas have to be sanitized a certain way in a certain process. We've seen our bulk sales down significantly, and that's because people are just not comfortable shopping that area. And now it looks like the state is basically really coming in and saying that you really can't have it. So a lot of our competitors have removed it, and we're in the process of evaluating that. And we've already removed a significant portion of it and gone to pre-packing it, which is kind of defeating the purpose of bulk, but it's a way to still offer those products, which typically they do have less packaging. We vacuum seal it, so it's a lot less package than a box of something, and it also helps to maintain that lower price point that you're accustomed to in bulk. So that's what we're doing to try to address the issue. But it's unfortunate because, and certainly in the natural food industry, kind of bulk is the backbone of how the industry really got started. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen elsewhere in the country. I don't know.
That's a shame. That's a shame. I mean, I totally agree with everything you said, Bart, but it's a shame, partially because I assume your margins are better on bulk as well. Right. But also because, it is the more sustainable option. But we knew, as we were starting to design Eat the Change, we wanted to get compostable packaging. We were hoping we could do bulk, and we just said, you know what? This is not the right moment for that. That's not what consumers want right now. They want safety. They want security. They want to believe, hopefully sometime later we'll be able to get back to bulk. But right now, that's just not what makes sense for the health conditions consumers are concerned about.
Yeah. I've seen some stores where there's folks, the idea of the return of the salad bar is coming back, but they had a staffer actually running the salad bar. So it was served, but you could kind of pick and choose there.
Yeah, I mean the salad bar, the buffet, all of those, those were ways of eating that we used to have, and I don't see those coming back in the form that we used to enjoy them.
Right. Yeah. And that's, and for us, that's a big part of our business for, our lunch business, which again, there's not a lot of people working right now in downtown Rockville. They're all working remotely at home.
Yeah.
But that was a big part of our business, and those bars are, are closed. And like you said, I don't foresee that coming back anytime soon. And for a smaller independent store, for us to put an employee there to serve it kind of defeats the purpose for us, as far as, the financial part of it. So, it's a difficult thing, but we've pivoted, and all those things are available packaged, and you take them home and heat them up in your oven or your microwave if you want to, and have the same quality food at home as you were getting off the bar. It's just that we're telling you that it's a pound instead of 3/4 pound.
right, the stack of beans instead of just a few. I've got a question from one of our entrepreneurs, actually, from the Innovation Lab. Is it reasonable to pass the cost of converting to compostable recycling packaging on to the consumer and letting them know through labeling that the packaging is sustainable in those ways? I mean, if the cost increase is under 10%, perhaps, I mean, should the business plan to absorb that cost increase?
Yeah, I think you have to. I mean, the goal is to create a margin for yourself, so you can't, handicap yourself and then not ask the consumer to pay for it. The challenge is, how do you communicate to the consumer that that's worthwhile? So with Eat the Change, we're looking at packaging, and we committed to using a recyclable package, which costs more. But that's an investment we're going to make, and we're going to communicate this is the package and how to recycle it. And we'll certainly let the buyers know. And the goal is, over time, if you get scale, that cost will come down, but it does cost more. And you can't handicap the business so that it doesn't have, a competitive margin.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you're not making money, you're out of business eventually anyway, for sure.
Right, and I think I'll add on to that. I think, like we saw with organic, that the prices come down on the ingredient side, like I was saying earlier. I hope that, with more and more people adopting, recyclable, compostable materials, that the price is going to come down. So I think that, I'm confident that's going to happen in time, and that'll make it a lot easier for these smaller businesses to use those and not have to worry about that loss of margin or increase in price.
I want to ask a couple of questions that tie in a little bit to government, the role of government for fair practices. One is what role does the government play in ensuring fair practices? And the other one gets more into certification. So maybe we'll start with the role of government. The question gives an example of orangutan-friendly palm oil extraction. Where do you see the government sort of stepping in and keeping an eye on that kind of thing?
It doesn't feel like a government level involvement to me. That would be a certification. So, I'm not familiar with orangutan friendly, but I'm certainly friendly with like rainforest friendly or fair trade. And that's an independent third party. So I think you do want third parties to verify that thing. You can't take suppliers at their word. So you need someone else who is keeping an eye on them. Doesn't have to be the government. And I don't see government getting involved in that level of scrutiny that you referred to. But those certifications are valuable. And the only one that, aside from like USDA, approved for meat and things like that, but USDA organic is a case where the government is involved in oversight. And I love that program because it's a positive incentive. It's not a regulation. It's not the government telling everyone they have to be organic. It just says, if you want to use the words organic, you have to meet these standards. So it's an aspirational standard. And I think it's powerful when the government gets involved in that. I can't imagine, or I don't foresee the government getting involved in like a labor standard. That's just not, aside from violations, like an OSHA violation or something like that.
Do you think that applies for kind of international standards as well, or different?
Yeah, you're not going to get an international monitoring body for those types of things. That's why the independent third parties, to me, are the right way to do that.
On the topic of certifications, Stephen asks, is the ISO or GRI certification Is the ISO or GRI certification better in terms of supply chain management and or making sure suppliers are using sustainable principles in their production? And he follows up and says, you know, if neither, which certifications would you recommend for that? Which I feel like ties into what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't use either of those for our certifications. We just relied on fair trade, which obviously is a much higher standard. You know, I don't think consumers have a knowledge about ISO or GRI on a real basis. So you got to make sure, you know, you've got using standards and certifications that are relevant to what consumers know and their points of reference.
Mm-hmm. Bart, do you have anything to
I would add, I mean, it's kind of like I said before about the organic versus the local. It's really important that the consumer understands what the certification is, like Seth just said. So, you know, I think it's the ones that are, you know, that are more well recognized and are easier to understand is going to be more beneficial. I mean, certainly we don't do things just to put a label on the product. I mean, it's about what the mission is and doing the right thing for the product, but you also need to communicate it to the customer if you want to have a sustainable, viable product. And so you want to choose certifications that you know, are going to have meaning to the customer.
Building on that thought around, you know, certifications and reporting, you know, as the role of impact investing becomes more prominent and more investors are looking at companies that reflect the values that they are trying to kind of, you know, prioritize in their work. You know, how, like, I mean, companies, you know, they obviously have to communicate to their consumers and the customers, you know, first and foremost, but stakeholders as a whole, you know, do matter, and investors care, and increasingly so as impact comes into play. Where do you see that happening? Certifications, communication, branding, like, is this becoming a bigger deal, or is it kind of, is impact investing from food and sustainability not really as strong as, you know, people in the field may hope it is?
Well, I think it's growing. I love to see it, you know, more, there are more brands doing it, offering it. I think it's always that question of, for the consumer, what does it mean to me? How is it relevant to me? So does organic mean it tastes better? Does it mean it's better for my health? Does it mean it's better for the environment? And you know, in that order, those questions matter to different people in different orders. So I guess you want to make sure you're touching on the points that really matter to them. But I don't think people buy stuff just because of certifications. It's got to be relevant to them.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we've tackled all of the questions in the chat. Bart, Seth, do you have any last words or thoughts or advice? Or, oh, we have one more come in, maybe, if you guys are okay on time a little bit. Should markets or vendors do more to extol the sustainability, value, and benefits of products? Or is the onus on producers alone? Aha. That's on you, Bart. Oh, you're muted.
Trying to unmute. I think it's very much on us. So, you know, perfect example is, you know, if you, we switched from styrofoam trays, meat trays, to a recyclable, sustainable plastic type tray. And it's not really that noticeable. You know, we did it because it's the right thing to do. But if we don't communicate to the customers kind of what that is, then they are not really getting the benefit of what we're trying to do, and we're not getting the benefit of what we're trying to do. So, you know, it's an educational piece. I think that it's part of our responsibility as, you know, as a retailer, is to educate consumers on what we're doing and the benefits of what we're doing. So it's definitely on all of our sides. I mean, it's the vendor's responsibility. If they, you know, produce a product and they reuse a recycled container, and they don't put anything on there that says it's made out of recycled materials, it's great for the environment and it's great for them personally. Then they're doing something for their mission, but they're not communicating it to anybody. So they're not getting the benefit of it, you know, and there is a cost associated frequently with these types of things. And the trade-off on that is that hopefully you're going to get a couple extra purchases out of it, but you're not going to get the purchases out of it if you don't communicate what it is. So, you know, for us, you know, and me personally, I'm very passionate about supporting the community and supporting these local vendors, and we're going to continue to do that. But if I don't communicate that to my consumers, then Dawson's may not be successful. So I need to basically communicate it, you know, in order for us to be able to do more of it.
What's the risk? How much should small startups kind of try to test out that sustainability effort? If it's an expensive choice to order packaging, you know, of a certain type, and to make that leap, at what point should they even try? If they know that they can do it slightly less sustainable and still, you know, do everything right, like how do you test that out without going under?
I'll let Seth answer, because he was, you know, I think having that path, like he was talking about, is probably the right thing. So here's our goal, and we might not get there, like he was talking about with the kosher. You know, so having a plan, and you can do little pieces of it, and you can make changes, and you can get better. You know, there is scale, like we talked about. So, you know, you start out with, you know, 85% organic ingredients, you know, with a goal of being 100% organic ingredients. And I think customers will understand that, you know, that it takes time to get to that point. But I also think customers are willing to pay a little bit more for those things.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, we, this brand we're launching, Eat the Change, we were talking about food waste, we're talking about plant-based, all these things. And then we were looking at a package that wasn't recyclable. And we're like, oh, well, that's not, it all breaks down if we, you know, as much as we're doing around those things, if we can't have a recyclable package. That's not, now the idea would be we have a package that you just sort of snap your fingers and it turns into a plant. We don't have that yet, but at least we said, well, we've got to be consistent here. So we will pay the extra cost to get a recyclable bag. Like, so that was a step for us. And I think, you know, part of it is what exactly you're selling. And look, you know, a brand like a beer brand, I don't think there's as much of an onus there to make that environmentally friendly. That's not an occasion people generally think of as, now if you say you're going to be an organic beer brand, and then maybe you do want to think about that. But I just think it depends what you're selling is really important. And what by that, not just the product, what is the ethos behind what is in the package.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, it is 4 o'clock. I mean, we do have a few more minutes technically, but you know, if we wrap up early, fantastic. Busy people around here. So final call for questions. If anyone has anything else they'd like to ask our two amazing panelists. Seth, Bart, thank you both for sharing your wisdom with us today. If you have any last words, I open the floor to you.
I'll just say, look, it's tough time to be an entrepreneur, especially in food, because like we talked about, you know, the shelves are there's a higher hurdle rate, higher expectations to get on the shelf. And then when you're on the shelf, it's a harder time to get in front of the consumer because consumers aren't able to sample the way they used to. But I also think it's a moment of opportunity because there are a lot of changes happening. I think people are re-examining the choices we've made in our diets and even in our economy. And so I think there's an openness to changing habits. And I think, you know, partners like Bart are great because they are willing to take those risks with those early entrepreneurs. And so they're only going to become more valuable as we want to see new concepts bubble up. And I do think, I hope this is a turning point where people are moving towards more sustainable diets. And so as much as it's risky and challenging and hard to do, it's also really even more important than it's been. And I do think I'm optimistic about the prospects for these new brands that are getting started.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll add that, you know, it's the silver lining in this whole thing has really been for the grocery stores, you know, so more people are at home, more people are cooking at home. So, you know, there is an opportunity in that respect to, you know, to get your product onto the table in somebody's house because more people are staying home. They're not going out to eat in restaurants as much. So there is, you know, it depends on how you look at it, but there is, you know, there is an opportunity there. If you make a fantastic simmer sauce, you know, and you've got a lot of people that have not been cooking, you know, really weren't cooking before, they're now having to cook, you know, if they have a really good simmer sauce, it makes the job a lot easier for them. So, so depending on kind of what the product is, there's the opportunity. But we, you know, we're here for the long haul and we want to hear from people that want to start up businesses. And I didn't get a chance to mention, but we are putting in a small secondary kitchen here for that purpose. And so, you know, if people are looking to try things out, we would love to have people come in and test the products out here. And, you know, that's what's going to keep Dawson's always having something unique for our customers to come try.
I'm excited for you. That's going to be a lot of fun having that up there. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining
Sure.
us this afternoon. We will
Thank
have a summary of this up online. Our amazing intern, Sam Wenger, will be putting that together in the next couple of days. We'll have this up on YouTube. Please reach out if you have any questions for me about the Innovation Lab, joining our accelerator program or our amplifier. And Bart, Seth, you guys are amazing.
Great to
You're
be with you,
inspiration
Patty.
for the entrepreneurs around. I'm
Thank
so glad you
you.
could join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Thank you.